Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to be witness to some of the top directors across Asia on this panel, the Directors Collective. So let me introduce the panelists on stage. Jessica Kam, Senior Vice President, HBO Asia Original Productions, HBO Asia. Joko Anwar, Director from Indonesia. Ho Yi Hang, Director from Malaysia. Lee Sang-woo, Director from Korea. And finally, the moderator for this session, Mr. Daniel Yin, veteran film producer from Blue 3 Asia.
Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be able to moderate this panel and to ask interesting questions to the four of you here. But before I start, let me just quickly frame my questions. I think right now as we speak, the landscape is changing as we speak because of this thing called the digital age or the digital revolution. So everything is changing, and the route is not just to only the big screen, but actually some of the smaller screens are as interesting, if not sometimes even more interesting. And the whole idea that the traditional media is moving downwards and the digital media is moving upwards is something that we have to contend with. And just to highlight one point, the dollars are moving with the eyeballs, and for the first time this year, digital ad spend surpassed TV ad spend, and that is very telling in many ways. So because of that, the whole production and producing landscape is slowly changing. And what really is interesting also for filmmakers and producers is that you changed along. I will talk a little bit about, just less than a minute, about Singapore. It is in some ways the same in that there's only one director that actually is making hit movies, Jack Neo. The rest are really not really making it, but that is the same thing. But what is different is that a lot of new avenues have opened up for directors, including online creators. So that's really what's happening in Singapore. Okay? It is the same, and it's very, very different because there are a lot more options. So I'm going to start by asking my neighbor from Malaysia. Yeah, and so, Mr. Ho.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I've read about what you have been doing, and I want to ask, in Malaysia, what is the same and what has changed, and what is working? What genre works for Malaysia now, your market?
It's been like this for the past few years when you talk to producers in Malaysia, and all they want is horror films.
Horror films.
Yeah, horror films in general still make a dent in the box office. Even the really bad ones still manage to do some business, you know. So it's almost like a surefire bet when producers put their money on horror films. Yeah, for some reason. Yeah.
So, but what about your films?
I'm making horror films now.
Tell us about one of your horror films. Yeah.
Well, the project that I'm working with HBO, it's a horror project, Folklore.
Okay.
So 6 directors, 6 countries. We get to tell our own folklore stories in our own language. So that's very exciting.
So that would be, in other words, horror specific to your generic and specific to your territory, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the most exciting things that's been happening, I think. And I haven't done TV. This is my first time.
Okay.
I've been avoiding TV like a plague until, it's, HBO thing. So the first TV thing I'm doing is with HBO. Yay. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So very quickly for Indonesia. Okay. Joko, what genre works for Indonesia?
Up until 4 years ago, 2014, what worked best was religious theme films.
Really?
Islamic religious films mostly telling stories about how a woman accept the fact that her husband getting more wives. That's the theme that really sells up until 4 years ago. But since there were a lot of movies with similar stories, people begin to leave and not watch the theme again, and then it switched to comedy.
Yeah, I was wondering when comedy would come up.
Yeah. So last year, out of the top 5 of Indonesian films, 4 of them are comedies. But in terms of the number of tickets that we sell for Indonesian films, there have been a significant increase. 3 years ago, we sold 25 million tickets for Indonesian films. Last year, we sold 34 million tickets for Indonesian films.
Oh, I see.
And as of today, we have sold 34 million. So until before the end of the year, we expected 35 to 36 million tickets for Indonesian films. But this year, what really worked is horror.
Horror.
Yes. So number one, the top 5 films this year, 3 of them are horror.
And we're talking to someone whose film is the number 1 film, right?
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about the slave who is for Satan.
Yeah, I made this horror movie called Satan's Slaves. It was based on a popular horror film from 1992. It wasn't a remake, it's more like a reboot. And it sold 4.2 audience this year. And it has been sold to 40 something countries. It's going to be screened theatrically also outside Indonesia.
I was told this just now that it's sold to Singapore as well, right?
Yeah,
as of today. Right?
Yeah. And number 2 is a comedy, but number 3 and number 4 are horrors also.
Okay.
Respectively, number 3 got 2.7 million viewers, and number 4 is 2.5 million viewers. So 35 million tickets sold this year. That will translate to roughly $100 gross.
Wow.
So it's pretty good.
Yeah. So to ask something about your first point, why do you think in the last 1 or 2 years there's a surge
Of horror?
of people going to the cinema?
Well, there has been an improvement in quality, in terms of quality.
Okay.
Horror film has been a prima donna in Indonesia, even from the 70s, 80s, just like I think also Southeast Asian countries. It's a surefire bet to make film, horror film. But I think for the last 2 years, there has been a significant changes in the genre. The year 2000 was marked as the revival of Indonesian cinema. And one of them was because of this movie called Jai Langkung. It sold 1.2 million viewers. Back then it was such a big numbers. But after that, there were a lot of horror films made poorly, with very bad storytelling, badly written, bad acting. So people began to leave the horror genre.
Okay.
But 2 years ago, there have been a significant change in terms of the quality of horror films. So people have been wanting to see good quality horror films, and now they have it. So they really welcome the genre to.
Okay.
To
Before Satan's Slave, your genres were mostly what genre for you?
Oh, I've been working on various genre. My first film was in 2005. It was a comedy.
Yep.
It was also a big box office hit that year. But my third...
Is that Johnny Be Brave?
No, Johnny's Promise.
Okay, Johnny's
Promise.
Promise.
Yeah.
After, yeah.
After Johnny Be Brave is my short film.
It's a short film, yeah.
Yeah, my second film is a fantasy film. My third film was psychological horror. My fourth film is psychological thriller. My
Wow,
fifth
so
film is
it's moving
drama.
towards horror.
So I've been working on various genre, but each one of them has horror elements in it. I also work on the HBO Asia original Half-Worlds.
Half-Worlds, yes.
It was an action horror series as well.
Yes. I was told that you need some cajoling and persuading for the person to sell you, to agree on the rights for the reboot. Tell us a bit about
yes,
that.
I've been the original movie from 1992 was my childhood favorite. I saw it in the cinema when I was 7 years old. That's why I'm very normal now. So I saw it in the cinema, and it was like the best experience I had as a child watching a film in the cinema. And I've been wanting, after I became a filmmaker, I've been wanting to remake that film in a hope that I can give the same experience to new audience now, the feel that I had watching the original one, and that was the intention of making it. And I've been pursuing the film production company who holds the right to give me the rights to do it, and I've been chasing them for 10 years.
10 years, right? Yeah, that's why I was told. Okay, we'll come back to you in a bit. Let's go to Korea. Okay. Sang-woo.
Thank you.
Your latest or the one that's coming out, your latest film was Bitter Sweet Brew, right? And then I read about your other movies like Barbie and your first film, Tropical Manila, right? So in Korea right now, what works? What genre works?
Before I try this one, I'm just speaking on behalf of indie film directors.
Fine,
because
fine.
I'm not into the commercial areas. Unlike this too, I mean, I'm still in the ground. So the film that I have done so far, I have done 15 feature film,
Yeah.
and 6 film I invested in produce. So it's almost 12 one film. But I don't think you guys have seen one of my film. But I'm still working. So the what genre?
Yeah, actually, but in terms in the market, in Korean market, what genre works?
As you guys know, the Korean market is very huge. I mean,
Yeah.
Korea is one of the 3 countries. I mean, always win over American. So there's a huge. There's more than 200 the commercial film, and then 300 the feature film. I mean, it's indie film, and then 3,000 short film. So it's like it's a big competition. I mean, when you go out there, I mean, there are many directors out there. So, director, I mean, they just call everyone. I mean, so there are too many directors out there, and we make too many films. But when it comes to directing, I mean, the genre, the comedy and the action film is always work at the box office. And then we have some kind of obsession with the blockbuster film that hit 10 million. I mean, 10,000. 10. I can't calculate, but we're just so obsessed with the number, but the audience, I mean, because the population is 50 million dollars, 50 million people, but the biggest the grossing film is 17. So it's like one out of 3 film. I mean, 3 the Korean people just watch the one film.
Yes,
so
yes.
every year, I mean, it happens. So it's booming. But as you guys know, the Korean drama is very popular. But from the morning to the end, I mean, there are so many dramas in the film, but it's all about the comedy and the melodrama. So when it comes to the theater, we don't want to watch the dramas anymore on the big screen. So the melodrama never works at theater. Only the action film and then some thrillers.
So Train to Busan is a
Train to
horror
Busan is
thriller,
Yeah,
right?
thrillers.
I see. Okay, come back to you soon. Let's talk to Jessica. Okay, tell us about what works in China. I mean, the most happening, the most interesting, and the most important market.
What works in China? China is a huge market right now, and the genres that work most probably are comedies, action, and those that can, because the production budget is so high these days, and if you have to recoup, usually those are the ones that has the highest production value, that you sink a lot of money in special effects, things like the Monkey King series, or things that has to go very wide, like comedies. Comedies will work very well in China because it's wide. But it doesn't mean that those are the ones that can travel, though.
Yes, yes. But at one point, about 8 years ago or 5 years ago, it seems like anything works, you know. And then after a while, the audiences become a lot more discerning in China. So in the last 1 year, what were the kind of films that worked?
Actually, not everything worked before. Only a few things worked before. The general audience in China is very young. A few years ago when I was there, the average age was about 25.8. And then in a couple of years, it becomes 20 point something. So we're talking to a general audience that is very, very young. And to target those young people, they like certain things, you know, the coming of age kind of stories,
yes.
or young puppy love, romantic comedies, that kind of thing speak to them. But very heavy subjects, very heavy dramas and sad stories, they don't really work that well. That was before, and everybody tries to target this young audience. Lately, it's pretty enlightening that there are more and more different genres that work. It shows that the audience are growing up. Their taste becomes more sophisticated. I noticed that one Indian film worked really, really well, Dango,
Yes.
Drango.
Yeah.
Another one, Thai film. The first time a Thai film actually made it to such successful box office, Bad Genius. And
Yes.
that shows that their taste is widening, which is a very exciting thing. For
Someone
China
spoke
market.
about the fact that those dramas and melodramas that work on TV, somehow on the big screen, nobody wants to watch it. So what is the difference on the small screen and big screen in China?
Good question. The television market is targeted to more mature audience, usually those stay-home housewives, and the young people actually don't watch television anymore. They all go direct to OTT platforms. They watch things on iQIYI, Tencent, and that kind of platforms.
Yes.
And those are very completely different audience than the ones that watch TV. So, so there is a proliferation of web TV or web content that would be very different from the ones you see on television,
Yes.
which are the long, 80 episode series about the empress and the emperors and their concubines and that kind of thing. So it's two different markets.
What about adaptation from novels? It is something that China is a big deal in China. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. That's very popular as well. It's because
More on TV or on the big screen?
both actually, because there is a lack of content. There is a big demand. There's a huge growth in box office in China, about 30% per year. So we produce about 800 films a year in China, and a lot of hot money is getting into it. But that also means that there is a lack of original ideas. And the easiest ways to get them is to buy IPs. Whatever is already popular out there, you just buy them. And one thing there is not lack of in the Chinese market is money. So they go out and buy a lot of IPs, a lot of books, and try to adapt them into television shows or into films. But that sometimes work, sometimes not work, because from a novel to a full script is still a long journey, and not every investor know about that. So there's
So generally, does it work or it doesn't work in terms of law? The number of is working more or less?
some work.
Some, okay.
I don't know the numbers to
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Before you were with HBO, you were a very prolific film producer. In fact, you made a lot of films with a friend of mine called Jeff Lau. Yeah. So I just want to understand, because you were then based in Hong Kong, right? How are the Hong Kong directors faring in China now that the Chinese directors are emerging themselves?
Most of the Hong Kong directors are working in China now already. That's a reality. Hong Kong is a market that has only 7 million people, and China. And to produce a film in Hong Kong, we make a film for about a few million yuan. It's a big deal already. But in China, we are talking 100 million yuan for average. So if you put the same amount of work into a script and a production, you may as well do it in China. It's much bigger budget, much bigger audience. So it's just the reality, the sad reality that most of the Hong Kong directors are working in China right now.
And are they faring well? Are they doing well?
Some, but not all of them. Some adapt better, some not. After all, Hong Kong is still sort of a foreigner in that sense. You still understand the Chinese culture better than everybody else, but it's still not like somebody who grew up in China and knows the customs and the background of their society as well. So Hong Kong directors are seeing a lot of competitions from younger directors from China.
Yeah. Can I come back to Malaysia? I want to ask, because the whole landscape is evolving and changing and all that, as a filmmaker, actually right now, what are the challenges and how are they different from, say, 5 years ago or 8 years ago? What are the challenges, what are the difficulties of being a filmmaker in Malaysia?
I think we're still pretty traditional I mean, the way we make films remain the same, I suppose. It's just that I think younger people, the young filmmakers today, they have not so much baggage, I suppose. They would, web TV and stuff.
Yeah.
They start off with doing a lot of digital content. Not
Yes.
like us. We were more idealistic, I suppose. We wanted to make films, right? Yeah. So I was never I never did TV. I did some commercials, but the young filmmakers, they do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So they are pretty active.
So you're saying that there are more options for filmmakers these days?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are more options, and the digital content providers, the platforms, there are more for them to, there are a lot of chances to make films, to hone their crafts. Yeah.
So if the sort of entry level has gone down because of digital content, the general quality, is it up or?
Now, this is the interesting part, because they have to make a lot of short contents. They have to be accessible and stuff. So the craft of storytelling, it's a problem.
What do you say? Yeah.
I would say a lot of them shoot almost the same thing. There's nothing very unique.
A lot of comedy, right?
It's not the genre, it's the way they tell a story, or the way they present some stories that, you can't tell, they're all the same. You use the same kind of music, the same kind of style, Huh? Yeah, it's like fragmented sketches,
Yes.
so nothing.
Short sketches, yeah.
Short sketches,
Yeah.
so now the problem is when you're trying to do something a bit longer. Here's the challenge. Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of them would begin to crumble
Yeah.
when they start making longer forms.
So in Malaysia, is it the same as Singapore, that anything online, there's no business model except sponsorship? Or are people paying for online content?
No, we don't pay for anything.
So how do the filmmakers, the online filmmakers, how do they get by? By sponsors, right?
Yeah.
So
That's
it
the
would
only way.
actually be, so what you are saying, those are branded content.
Yes, a lot of those are branded contents,
Okay.
because that's 30,000, 40,000. We'll do it. We won't do it,
Yeah.
But any young filmmakers
Yeah.
will just get on
But
board,
recently, the likes of Jenny Boy and all that, they are moving over to making movies.
Yes.
Yeah. So how are these faring? I know that he has made 2 films.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, but
Okay, but are they
the thing
doing
is,
well? Because online they are free, right? So
Yeah.
if I watch them, I can watch them online, right?
Yeah.
Free, but now I have to pay. I have to go to a cinema to watch. How do they cross over?
I think that's not translating well yet, because how do you translate your likes and your popularity into box office tickets, right?
Okay.
We haven't seen that yet.
Yes.
You know.
So what you are saying now is that the art of storytelling
Yeah.
is a challenge.
It's a challenge, yeah.
And also the crossover is a challenge,
Yeah, it's a
because what they do it for the brands, right?
Yes.
And then they try to tell the story with the brands, right?
Yes, there's one very successful case, which is Name We. Name We
Okay.
make his name. He's a very naughty singer. So,
Yes.
so he sings some really fun songs, and the young people really like him because he swears. You know, he's
Yes.
like a rapper.
Yes.
So he's very, very popular. So when he first made his film, and that worked, the popularity generated box office because people were curious.
Yes.
But then,
But that was
second,
about
third,
four,
fourth
5 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but it didn't last.
It didn't
People
last.
got a bit tired because he was doing the same thing. He's quite talented.
Yeah.
Right? The thing is, his second, third, fourth film, the box office become, they slide, and people slowly they're not so interested anymore.
So can I ask you something a bit more pointed, and that is, name we got on the wrong side of the law as well. Okay, so in terms of censorship in Malaysia, what is the situation right now? For your kind of content, for example.
Well, censorship is always there. It's how you go around it. So
Yeah.
I don't have you can't fight it. That's the,
Yeah.
so you find cleverer ways to get around it. But
Yeah.
Name We actually made his name
Being naughty.
being naughty,
Yeah.
right? So he likes that. So he makes use of that to gain popularity. So I don't think it's a problem for him because anything that he cannot do, he gets the press.
Yes.
So and people are generally very curious.
Yes.
But you cannot do that all the time.
Yes.
The tactics would work and it wears out and so. Yeah.
What about Indonesia? What are the challenges? And what about is the line blurring between the online and the offline world?
Well, so far for filmmakers, even though there are more and more OTT at the moment, we have several even regional OTT coming to Indonesia and have offices there. But in terms of original content, there are not many being produced yet.
Okay.
So in terms of the opportunities for filmmakers to make content for OTT is not very high. So we're still concentrating on the cinema production.
But some of the YouTubers who made movies have been quite successful, right? Very slapstick comedies.
No.
No. Okay.
Because there have been several attempts to make films with YouTubers, and they did not translate very well.
So
to
generally,
the
it's
cinema.
still
I
the
think
same.
yeah?
It's the same.
like cinema.
Okay.
But there are in some cases where the YouTubers also stand-up comics. It works,
Yes.
but not all the time.
Yes.
But if it's YouTubers exclusively and they are brought to the cinema, and usually it didn't translate very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in terms of filmmakers, what are the challenges?
The biggest challenge in Indonesia now is good script writers. We don't have enough good script writers, so we have some. I prefer just direct and not write because writing takes so much energy. You have to be very apa namanya itu yang
Discipline.
Yeah, discipline.
No. You have to be alone working.
Alone?
Yeah, it's very lonely. It's a very lonely profession. But we have some good scriptwriters, but the style doesn't match the stuff that I want to do.
Okay.
So I think it's about the same in Malaysia, also in Singapore.
Why we started to write is because we couldn't find script writers.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we have to learn how to write.
We have to write because we could not find scriptwriters that can suit to our.
I think
need
Singapore is
films.
probably worse. But
Really?
yeah,
Indonesia
probably
just-
worse. Yeah.
Indonesia have 250 million people, but
Yeah.
good scriptwriters are very rare. So I think it's the common problem for Southeast Asia.
Even in
countries.
China, I was working on a Chinese project. They told me to write it myself. Just do it yourself first,
You're
and
good
then
at it.
come and pitch it.
Yeah, because technician we have plenty, like
Yeah.
good cinematographers,
Yes,
good
yes,
editors. We have plenty.
Yeah.
yeah, directors we have some, yeah, okay lah.
What about cost? You know, in Singapore, the crew, the cost of the crew has gone up so high that it has become a big problem. But what about Indonesia?
Indonesia is still okay, but that's mainly because film crew also work in TV commercials and other commercial contents. They want to, sometimes they want to work in films because for them it's more like a labor of love. So they make money doing TV commercials. I make money doing TV commercials. While I make films, I get lower fee.
Okay.
Except if it's box office hit and I get bonus, but that's very rare. So yeah, that's the biggest problem, good scriptwriters. Also, I think one of the problems also in Indonesia, because usually if someone wants to make films, they go to private investors. And since most of these private investors do not possess the knowledge of good films and good filmmaking, they likely to give their money to anyone who can give them the best bullshit. So sometimes good filmmakers, because they are very honest, they cannot, sell based on words only. They give facts. Sometimes people who wants to give to invest, someone who wants to invest, they become really worried. But those who are not actually filmmakers but can give bullshit to this private investors, they get money to make films.
I think you're talking about something that actually is also very prevalent in China and in some parts of Singapore, and I think in every market.
Yeah, but the problem is.
But what about good filmmakers who have good track record?
No, yes. Let me continue with the fact. Because these films are made and Indonesian films do not have distributors. Producers deal directly to the exhibitors. So exhibitors feel that they have to accept this movie and screen these bad films because they don't want to be branded anti-Indonesian films, etc. So they screen this film and take over the screen time of the screen, because we don't have many screens. We only have 1,300 something screens across Indonesia. Yeah, for real filmmakers, it's harder actually. Yeah.
I see. And what about the other problem that is not so much a problem in China because it's regulated, not a problem in Korea because the Korean films outdo the American films or the foreign films. But what about foreign films in Malaysia and Indonesia? In terms of box office, people going to watch the Marvels, the DCs,
Fast and Furious, they always do very well.
They always,
Fast and Furious also in Indonesia very well.
Yeah, big time. And in China too, very well.
But sometimes Indonesian films surpass the box office.
Yes.
I mean,
exceptional cases.
Exceptional cases.
Yeah, 2 or 3 films would be very good, but still, it's not going to beat Transformers.
Yes.
Yeah.
I beat Transformers.
You beat Transformers? Fuck.
Can we give him a round of applause? Yeah, not Malaysia, but I think some of the Singapore films beat the big titles as well. But what he's saying are the very, very big titles, the event movies. It is tough. But in Korea, it's a very different situation.
Oh, yeah, it's a totally different situation.
Yes. Please tell us more.
Okay, speaking of the online platform, you told me, I think that I'm the biggest winner on the online marketing, because as I told you before, I have done so many films. It's like a 15 film and 6 investors, but that's what I did. But when it comes to online things, we have more than 200 the platform Korea. So they just pay $4, but I just get half of the money. But my second film, the Modernist Whore, I only spent $5,000, but the total gross is $300,000.
Okay.
That's how I just make a living, and that's how I just keep making film.
Okay.
Because people always just ask me, how just make a living and how just keep making film? I mean, just your father must be rich and blah, 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 blah. I'm just sick of it, I'm just hearing, but no, that's how I survive. Because the way I just make a film is it's like I only use 2 or 3 crews. I just get paid, it's like $100 every day. But the shooting day is only 6 or 7 days. So every time I just finish this one, I just send it to the film festival. After I just finish this one, we just show this at theater, but it's only 5 or 6 theater because no one want to watch the film. Because the last film that I showed is I'm trash. Also, I directed and I was in the film as a leading role. Only 18 people came to the screening. They came to watch the film at theater. But after the theater, I released it online because there are tons of people. I mean, usually in my film, there are lots of pervert guys and pervert people. They, no, seriously. I love pervert people, I mean, because only pervert people watch my film. But there are too many pervert guys out there in Korea. So they just gave me money, and then I just survived.
I saw your list. Yeah.
No, I mean, just,
I saw your list, and
there are too many.
mother is whore, right?
Mother is already my second film.
Father is
Father's dog.
dog. Yeah,
And I'm
mother
trash.
is dog.
That's a trilogy.
I am trash, right? Yeah. I was like, wow.
All the film that I made was banned in Korea.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 7 film was banned, so I had to cut because there's several scenes that there's incest fucking things. I mean, it happened because I couldn't find the actress in my film. So that's why I used me as an actor. So 7 film, I was in the film as a leading role, and I showed my dick because my dick is not big. But every time it comes out on a big screen, people are thinking, "Oh, this keep just making a fun of my the small dick," but it's okay. Because when it comes to the Korean screening, I have the bro. Yeah, I'm bigger than this guy. I haven't seen, but he's actually.
Okay,
So I think that's why the Korean the online thing is so huge. I mean,
you said, again, how many platforms are there?
It's more than 200 platforms.
Okay.
But still, 30% people that stay just download illegally. Because as I told you, we don't have HBO because we people just download HBO film illegally. That happens, but 70 people still pay for those.
Wow. What about any other challenges of filmmakers besides
getting funding? I mean,
Yeah.
there are, as I told you, there are more than 200 commercial film, but more than 300 commercial film and the feature film. But that's how it is make the feature film because we have a funding from Coffee, Korean Film Council, but it's about a little money. It's like they only paid 1,000 or 10. It's still about 10,000, but no one make the film with $10,000. But I can make it $5,000. But the lowest budget they can make is $100,000. But no one can make the $100,000. That's why they sell their houses, everything.
I see.
So funding is a big problem because yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Sorry, yeah.
So Jessica, what about China? I mean, what are the parallels happening in China?
Well, first of all, you can imagine my joy working with such a fun panel of directors on Folklore, our new HBO show. China, the question is challenges?
The challenges, yeah.
The biggest challenge right now is finding talents. It's kind of ridiculous. A country with 1 billion people, we always have to wait for the biggest stars, especially for films. I've worked on a film that I have funding, I have director, I have a script, but we waited 5 years for a film, for the right stars. So it's the biggest problem.
What about writers?
Writers too. There is a huge shortage of writers. Again, it's strange.
It's quite strange, right? Because the market is so big.
The market is so big, but the talent or the skill set doesn't catch up. It needs years. It takes years to train a writer to write it professionally. And in China, when you haven't made it yet, okay, you make so much money and nobody looks for you. And when you have one script that turns out into a, that just come out in the box office, then everybody will want him, and then his price will be like 10 times as high, and it's like out of ordinary. So it's just a problem.
Because in China, there's this new phenomenon called the internet movies, where people pay for the only market in Asia where people pay for streaming. People pay. So does that eat into Korea as well? Yeah. But that does it eat into the box office? Does it eat into, or actually it doesn't because the market is too big?
Yeah, it hasn't.
It hasn't. Yeah.
Well, there are enough people following the web series in China, which is a growing market. A lot of people and investors are putting money into webisodes, and they're putting a lot of budget into it. But still, the box office somehow is still growing at 30% a year. It's coming from a low base to start with. There are still a lot of cities, third tiers, fourth tiers, fifth tier cities that don't have a cinema yet. So putting a cinema there will mean, that's what has been propelling the box office
Yes,
growth. Yeah.
that's true. And what about in terms of the other challenges, funding and things like that?
Funding is
Censorship.
not as big a problem. Censorship, we don't see it as much a problem when you live there, when you do things there, because you just...
You know what to do, right?
Yeah, you know what to do. If you are telling a horror story, you know the ending has to be that it is a dream.
Yeah.
Or things like that. You just dance around the narrow
Or you are hallucinating.
limits of censorship.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about folklore then. I mean, since we're all talking about the horror genre,
Yeah.
and folklore is interesting because it covers so many Asian markets. Tell us a bit more about folklore.
Yeah, it's a pretty ambitious project that we are embarking on. It's a collection of 6 different horror stories based on folklores of 6 different countries, with 6 different very renowned directors, and 3 of them are sitting here. And they're going to tell their brand of horror. And so it's something worth anticipating on HBO 2018.
So it's a series of individual film, right?
Yeah, individual TV films, basically.
Okay.
It's an anthology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the duration of the film?
It's about 1 hour.
Yeah. Okay.
And we hope that this model works. And if it works, then we could have a folklore too. We could have some other formats in a similar way that we will bring together a collection of directors to explore different themes. I
So
think
how
it'll be
did this
exciting.
idea come about?
Eric Koo, who is the showrunner of the series and also a very renowned director from Singapore, he was the one who comes up with this idea, and he's the one who brings together such a stellar panel of directors. And it came to us, and I thought it fits what we need. At HBO, we want to push boundaries, and this is pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, this is
as
really
much
pushing
as
the boundaries.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got 1-2 minutes left. So I would like to just ask Malaysia, Indonesia, Korea, and Singapore, and Hong Kong, China, any parting words about filmmaking in your market?
Wow, that's very abstract. Bye.
Anything
parting words?
anything that what we were discussing, anything that make you think of something that you want to say about your market?
I don't know if it's the same in Indonesia or Korea, but that many young people, they just want to be in the film business and they don't love films. They love to be in the business. So I hope they love films a bit more.
Is it because of the online creators that the entry level is lower and more people just want to make film?
I'm not sure. Yeah, but when you speak to them, a lot of them, it's hard to engage in a conversation about, films or the kind of stories we want to tell. It's always about the job, the work, the techniques, and whatnot.
So
yeah.
Are you also saying that actually some time ago it is more difficult to be a filmmaker than it is now?
Yeah, in a way. Not very easy,
Okay.
Yeah, not very easy. Yeah, I also hope that I wish not so many people want to be directors. Some should be script writers. Some should be editors. We're short of editors.
Yeah.
Good editors, So yeah, those are very important disciplines, and I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Indonesia?
Well, I can help being optimistic about Indonesian films. Actually,
Optimistic,
because,
right? Good.
Our cinemas are expanding.
Yeah.
There are more investors coming to build more cinemas. Problems with filmmakers, yes, but there are more and more people, like Yu Hang said, young filmmakers want to be in the business. Maybe they will bring something good to the industry. I mean, yes, they making films, most of them not because they love films, they want to be in the film business. But I think that will also expand the market. So maybe first job is to bring more people to the cinema, and then we can, at the same time improve the filmmaking. So
Johan's wish is that there should be more professionals across the board, for the food chain. So for Indonesia, what is your wish for the filmmaking world?
Sorry?
What is your wish for the filmmaking world?
My wish, I wish there are venture capital
Okay.
for funding.
For funding, right?
That are managed professionally, so they can give money to those who really
Deserving.
good at the job.
Okay. Sangwoo, what about Korea? Anything you want to say?
I just want to focus on the Asia thing. Yeah, she just gave me a big challenge, yes. Yeah, I'm going to stop making stupid indie film. for the time being.
Anything else?
Yeah, it's love being here, and thank you so much for being just
Jessica, any parting words
About China?
about China and Hong Kong and China? Yeah, China.
All right. For China, I think it's all eyes on China right now because of its growth and it's because of the money and hot money and all that. Having worked there for 8 years, it's exciting in that sense that you can get a lot of resources and funding that way. But it's also not without its limits. The creative limits, a lot of areas we could not explore while you are in there, and you have to dance within the limit of censorship. So now that I'm putting on my hat, HBO hat, I think is actually quite liberating. There are quite a lot of areas that I haven't been able to touch. I wouldn't even think about touching. Like horror is one of them, and it's quite liberating that there is a creative space for filmmakers like these to explore their interests and their and what they wanted, the kind of stories they wanted to tell. So, yeah.
Thank you, directors and producers.
Thank
all of
you.
you.
thank you.
And thank you for being around. See you at the movies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel and the panelists.